This is the Caddx Vista Kit, and whether you want to admit it or not, this has been the industry standard for digital FPV systems for some time now. Well, DJI is back again with a new and improved system, this time in the O3 Air Unit. So, is it worth the extra cost over the original system? Well, today we're going to find out. Okay, so here it is, the DJI O3 Air Unit, DJI's second generation digital FPV system. And this thing promises to have an increase in performance and feature set over the original Air Unit. Now, if you're watching this video, you're probably in one of two camps. One, you're probably not a DJI user and considering trying to get into this DJI ecosystem. Or two, you're probably an existing DJI customer like myself and wondering if it's worth the upgrade over the original Air Unit. So because of that, we are going to take a look at the Vista Kit, this brand spanking new Vista Kit, open it up and see what you get compared to the O3 unit. Okay, so before I open up this Vista unit here, I do want to weigh this whole package, although it may be insignificant. I do suspect that this thing here is a little bit lighter compared to the new O3 Air Unit, 58 grams, and here's the new one. 80 grams. Now this is in the packaging here, so this is not the actual weight of the Air Unit, and we are going to weigh it once we do take it out the box. So for this one here, I do need to have my unboxing knife, which I have right here. All right, so here you go, the Vista Kit here, pretty nice with the Vista on the top here. You have all the specifications on the back. All right, so let's open up and see what we get in here. All right, pretty cool. There's a manual in here, that's pretty cool. And here's the Air Unit. This thing is pretty nice. Here's your camera. Now this is the original DJI camera and said to be the best camera still for the original Air Unit. So this thing here should be the best quality from all the cameras that's available for this Air Unit. And this thing here is pretty small, very straightforward. You have this MIPI cable here going to the camera, and that's it, very small, compact design. You have these holes here, 20 by 20 to mount this VTX in your drone. Some harnesses here, some screws to mount the Air Unit, and then you have an antenna in here. Pretty straightforward, guys, very simple design. So pretty straightforward design, very similar to what I have here in my X-Night 35 from Beta FPV DJI. A little bit different antenna on here, left-hand circular polarized. This one doesn't say, but I'm sure it's also left-hand circular polarized as well. Put this on, hopefully you can see that. 30, and then with the antenna, 32 grams. So 32 grams, not bad. Now this one here, we're talking about a 1080p camera that can record at 60 frames per second if you do have the Air Unit. And if you record it in the goggles, then you can have 720 image at 120 frames per second. And you have all the controls from this camera, whether it be the aspect ratio from 16:9 to 4:3, as well as changing the contrast, saturation, and exposure on this camera. So this is a full-fledged camera, and this is indicative of the best camera that we have, as I said before, for this first generation Air Unit. All right, so let's take a look at the new DJI O3 Air Unit. Now the presentation here is a little bit different, a white box here, which is very indicative of the DJI products. You have the camera, VTX, and antenna setup on here. This one has no specs on here, no manufacturing date. On the bottom here, you have your serial number, and that's it. And there you go, no more struggle to open this up. This one is a lot thicker manual and there's a lot more information on here. And this thing has a lot of features on here, guys. So it might be in your best interest to take a look at it, especially if you're gonna install this, which I will be doing here in the next video. Okay, so all this is saying that this device gets really, really hot. So if you're gonna mount this into your craft, make sure it has proper ventilation, as well as the vibration. This has electronic image stabilization in here, and it takes gyroscopic information to stabilize the image. So if your aircraft is prone to vibrations, that will increase the vibration in the image as well, because it's gonna get bad or corrupt data going to the gyroscopes as well. So just remember that if you're gonna mount this, and they do recommend you mount this on a rubber mount, whether it be the camera and or the VTX. From my understanding, the gyroscopes or the accelerometers are in the camera, so that's a little bit different compared to some other systems on the market. Okay, so let's just pull this whole unit out here. You have the VTX, the camera, and the antenna already connected to the unit here. Wow, really nice. This thing looks a little bit more premium, guys. And as I said before, everything is just combined into this one harness. Really good presentation, and they're gonna simplify the installation process of this because everything is already on here. This is what you get. In my case, if you do have a flight controller that is DJI compatible, then you can just plug this straight into it and that really reduces the installation process, makes it very, very simple, and that's what I plan to do with my build that's coming up right now. Now on this side here, you have a micro SD port for a micro SD card. You can record your footage to a SD card, as well as a USB-C port in here, pretty good USB-C port, and that'll be used for flashing or updating the software or firmware on your VTX. Really, really cool. Besides that, there's no other ports here. You have two antennas on here, the same as this one, UFL connection, but you have two antennas on here and it goes into one, I guess, single antenna mask or assembly here. Now, DJI said this is the best solution here for both mounting, installation, and for having range penetration and having diversity. So they've figured that out. Now, I've seen some bind flies on the market that have these antennas separately, but DJI say for now this is the best one, and for me this is going to be a simple installation with this one antenna mast right here. Now in the front here you have the, I guess the most important part here. This is where the camera connects. This is your little MIPI cable on here. Very similar to the first one, and it is protected like the first one as well. I think the pins on this one is a little bit more. I think we have more pins on this one, so this one's a little bit wider, so you can't really swap the two, but you do have this protective case here you can remove to get access to those pins. Now the camera, the star of the show here is the camera. This thing feels pretty bulky, but the big difference, the obvious difference is the lens. This thing has a huge lens. Now, instead of recording at 1080p at 60 frames per second, you can record at 4K at 60 frames per second. Obviously to this, if you're gonna use your goggles, you can record at either 100 frames per second or 120 frames per second if you're using the DJI Goggles V2. So this thing is compatible with both the goggles, the DJI Goggles 2 and the DJI Goggles V2. There's still debate whether this is compatible with the DJI Goggles V1, but that doesn't look likely at this time of recording. Now the original Air Unit has access to a lot of cameras in the market. Obviously this is an older system, so there's a lot of cameras that was made for this. And most of them, including the one here, these are all micro cameras. We're talking about 19 millimeters. This one here is a little bit wider and especially a little bit taller, especially with this little circular hood here. And that's where you can attach ND filters. This is the same camera in the DJI Avata drone that everyone talks about. So if you've seen the image from that drone, you're probably gonna get the same image out of this camera as well. Now I bring that up only to say that this camera here is just slightly bigger. And that means if you had a frame that accepts a 19 millimeter camera and just barely at 19 millimeters, then this might be a little bit too big. And because of that, you are seeing manufacturers rushing to reinvent or change their configuration on their existing drones. iFlight seems to be leading the case on this one. They're releasing or re-releasing all their drones to accept this O3 Air Unit, and GetOrch is another company that's doing that as well. Now, another thing to consider, even if your drone can accept this larger camera, is the field of view. This one here has a 155 degrees field of view compared to the original 150. And that's 5 degrees difference, but that 5 degrees difference will mean that if you have the standoffs in your drone here, it might show up in your image. Now the whole point of the O3 unit here is to eliminate the need for an action camera. Just like I have here in my X9 35, I have the DJI Air Unit right in here. And although this thing is pretty cool and clear, it does give me a 720 image. I still have to add an action camera to the top of this drone. That means that if this was close to 250, then putting an action camera on here could make it go over the 250 gram point. Now you're saying, well, how do I stabilize this image here? That's the reason why I have an action camera on here. As I said earlier, we do have gyroscope information in here, and this thing will stabilize this in the box in the DVR automatically. Now, because of the gyroscopic information being recorded, you can also put this into gyroflow and stabilize the image that way as well. So you have numerous options if you want to take advantage of this higher resolution and frame rate. Take a look at this and see how much this thing weighs here with everything on here. 39 grams, 30 grams. All right, so 9 grams more. Okay, so it is heavier, guys. It is heavier. We'll talk about it a little bit later when we compare the two. It is heavier, but you get increased resolution, and then you also probably eliminate the need for an action camera. So we have both of the Air Units right on the table. We have the original, which is a little bit smaller, and the newer, the O3 Air Unit here. We're gonna talk about 6 reasons or 6 areas where the original Air Unit outshines over the new O3 unit, and 6 areas where the new one outshines the original Air Unit. First, let's talk about the latency on these two units. The latency on the original Air Unit comes in around 28 milliseconds when paired up to the original and the V2 goggles. So that's pretty quick compared to the 30 milliseconds on the new DJI goggles 2. So this one here is a little bit slower. There might be more latency involved. So if you're susceptible or sensitive to latency, I know a lot of guys avoid DJI just for that reason, then you're more likely to experience that or the same of that in the new O3 Air Unit. Now, 2 milliseconds isn't a big deal, but every millisecond does count and can add to the experience when flying, especially proximity flying. So the older Air Unit has the advantage in this case. The second area where the original Air Unit shines is in the frame rates. This one here can be clocked or recorded at 120 frames per second when using the V2 goggles versus just 100 frames per second in the O3 Air Unit. Now that comes down to the amount of information being sent to these wires and antennas. Obviously now we have a 4K image, a lot more information, but because of that same bandwidth, you're gonna take a hit in the frame rate. Now there's a caveat there. Now that comes down to the goggles that you're using. Obviously the older goggles surprisingly can record or has a higher refresh rate compared to the new goggles too. So that is dependent on the goggles that you're using. The third area where the original Air Unit shines is the amount of drones that can be flown simultaneously. Now with the original Air Unit, you can fly up to 8 drones at the same time without any interference versus just 3. That's a huge hit, guys. Now, I do suspect that's gonna be like a firmware kind of thing, because why wouldn't that work? If you have this beautiful flying experience, you wanna fly with other people. This really reduces that experience, guys. A lot of people fly together in groups, and this will really hurt that experience. The fourth area where this shines obviously is gonna be time dependent, and that's the amount of cameras available to this Air Unit. Now this has been in the market for a little bit longer time, but there's an abundance of cameras on the market, and they can vary in price, performance, and availability. Now this one here I said is the original DJI camera, and this one here is the best, well, arguably the best for this original Air Unit, but you have some others as well, like this one right here. This is the Polar on here, and this is really, really good for like low light situation. This one is a starlight camera. So there's multiple cameras like that on the market. As far as the O3 Air Unit, you're just stuck with this one, whether it be a large drone or a small drone. And that could be a problem, guys, because there are a lot of smaller, I don't have a smaller drone here, but if you have a smaller drone, this might be a problem to fit into those smaller tiny whoops or just smaller drones, especially if you want to use the digital system. The fifth area where this shines out, we talked about, was the weight. And this one here, 74, weighs around 30 grams, as I just weighed it right here. And this one weighs around 39 grams, so 9 grams more. And if you're gonna fit this into your smaller whoop, then this one here is significantly heavier, or is heavier. So the sixth and final category or area where this one here shines is the price and availability. The price is significantly cheaper compared to the new O3 Unit. The price have gone down surprisingly over the years. Now, obviously, as you introduce a new product, the manufacturer is gonna reduce the price on the older product. We're seeing a setup like this between $145 anywhere to $200, depending on the situation, if there's a DVR built in or not, or depending on the camera on here. This new O3 Unit here is significantly more expensive. We're talking about nothing less than $225 to $230. And one thing I forgot to mention, guys, this one here also has a built-in memory as well, around 20 gigs of hard drive on here, or solid state memory on here. Okay, so we just talked about the 6 areas where the original Air Unit supersedes or is better than the new O3 Unit. Let's talk about 6 areas where this new Air Unit, is a lot better or superior to the original. Let's talk about the resolution. Obviously, this is a newer, Air Unit here, better technology. This one here has a 4K camera on here, and that can do a lot of things. You can crop in, you can stabilize better, you can eliminate the need for an action camera. There's a lot of benefits in having a higher resolution camera. Now you could also reduce it if you want to. Say you want to just post your videos to your family or to YouTube, then you can record in 1080p as well, and that's still available. So the flexibility with the resolution and frame rates on this is amazing. The second area where this shine is the built-in stabilization. We have Rocksteady on this, and as you're flying, you can record the stabilization information straight to your SD card, and you can play it back. The image will be stabilized. Now, if you want to do it yourself, you don't like the way it looks in Rocksteady, you can still take the gyro information, put it into your editor or your gyro flow and stabilize this image even more. Now, talking about gyro flow and stabilization, the third thing that's better on this one is the field of view. We talked about it earlier. This one has a 155 degrees field of view compared to the 150 degrees. The 5 degrees does make a difference. In addition, because this one here is a little bit lower resolution, the way how the stabilization works, you might have to crop into your image and then therefore reducing the resolution on your image. But because of the combination of the 4K camera and the wider field of view, especially if you're gonna do this in 4:3, you have a lot more real estate to actually crop in and stabilize your image, and that won't be a detrimental to your resolution as well. So this combination here is really good. The wide field of view and the 4K image. The fourth area where this one here shines is in the image quality. We're talking about the profile on here. You can record this in a D-like, cine-like profile, and this thing will record in a flat image profile where you can edit it, add the saturations, and make it look more professional. That's really good if you're on a set or you're filming. You can actually use the image on here, which, as I said before, can eliminate the need for an action camera. This will also increase the dynamic range of the image coming into your DVR and your goggles, so you can see a lot better in darker areas and not have the sky also blow out as well. So that's really, really nice. If you're a person who likes to edit videos, then that's a welcome sign. Something that we typically see in traditional camera drones, and this is not coming to FPV drones. That's a really welcome sign, and I'm kind of excited to actually try that out. Now, the fifth area where this thing here shines over the original Air Unit is a huge one for us, huge one in the hobby, and that's the OSD support. Now, this one here does connect to your flight controller, and this will display the Betaflight information on your goggles and can also be recorded on your DVR in your goggles if you do have the goggles too. This is something that we've been asking for a long time, since the original Air Unit, and other manufacturers, other type of VTX in the industry has had the OSD information in our goggles. The sixth and final area where this O3 unit here shines is in the range and penetration. Now, the original Air Unit, can go up to 13 miles. It was advertised to around 4 kilometers. But with the new unit, you have a lot more range and penetration. This one here is advertised to 10 kilometers at the normal or advertised latency here. So we're expecting a little bit further range. There's really no formal test as of yet. But if the original was rated at 4 kilometers and this one is rated at 10 kilometers, we might get a little bit more than 13 in perfect conditions. And that's a welcome sign. A lot of people really do value image quality and penetration. So if you're gonna go behind a building, especially if you're doing like some bando bashing or flying long range behind obstacles like trees, buildings, then that increase in range will be beneficial and will be appreciated, guys. So those are areas, obviously, where this one here shines over the original, and 6 reasons why this one here shines over the new O3 Air Unit. Now, this becomes even more complex and more complicated if you're gonna use the V2 goggles versus the goggles 2. Those specs can vary. Some of them can have, OSD and OSD recording. Some can't record OSD. Depending on the goggles that you use, some can record or show you 100 frames per second frame rate versus 120. So that's an idea for another video. I do recommend that you guys look that up. That's gonna be an interesting video, guys. But hopefully this video helped you in, coming either into the ecosystem or upgrading from your original Air Unit to the new one. I am rocking the V2 goggles, and besides the drop or the lower resolution in my actual monitors or goggles, the V2 isn't really a bad choice, guys. It might be the better choice depending on your situation. As we talked about, it could be higher frame rates, lower latency, and the experience is still the same, except the fact that you have a lower resolution and you also cannot record the OSD element to your DVR. Anyways, guys, let me know if this video helped. Let me know what you think about this O3 Air Unit. Are you gonna jump on board and install this into your drones? Obviously, there's positive and negatives. Obviously, it's more expensive. Is this gonna make you eliminate your action camera on your drone setup, guys? I'm gonna experiment with that and compare this to some of the cheaper action cameras and see if this is worth it. Although those action cameras are a little bit lighter as well, but we are gonna test those images as well and see how it compares to some of those options. So anyways, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. See ya, peace.